The termination letter trembled in my hands as tears blurred the words, "effective immediately" and "company restructuring." After 7 years of working 60-hour weeks, sacrificing weekends, and pouring my heart into my father's construction company, I had finally been dismissed with a cold corporate letter. I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt a strange calm washing over me as I remembered my father's words from his hospital bed 3 months ago. "Trust no one, Alexandra. Not even family. The envelope in my safe is your protection." Little did my brother know just how protected I truly was, or how desperately he would regret this decision. I stood in the glass-walled office that had been mine until 20 minutes ago, watching employees avoid eye contact as they passed by. My brother Marcus's signature was scrawled at the bottom of the letter, not even in his own handwriting but stamped with the signature machine I'd purchased for the company last year. 7 years at Wright Construction, working my way up from project coordinator to vice president of operations, erased with a form letter, while Marcus was conveniently away at a business conference in Aspen. The company phone on my desk, my former desk, rang suddenly, startling me. I instinctively reached to answer it before stopping myself. Not my job anymore. Not my problem. Cynthia, my assistant, appeared at the doorway, her expression a mixture of confusion and sympathy. "Alexandra, I don't understand what's happening. HR just told me to start packing your things." I handed her the letter. "Apparently, I'm no longer needed in the family business." Her eyes widened as she scanned the document. "This is ridiculous. The Peterson project would have fallen apart without you last month. The client specifically asked for you. Marcus can't just— Apparently, he can." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "He's the CEO now. But your father only passed 3 months ago. How can Marcus do this? You built the commercial division from nothing." I began gathering my personal items, surprisingly few after so many years. A framed photo of Dad and me at the groundbreaking of our first hospital project, the architectural award I'd received last year, a small cactus Cynthia had given me when I was promoted to VP. According to this letter, the company is moving in a bold new direction that requires streamlining upper management. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "Apparently that means firing your sister." Cynthia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face darkening. "It's a company-wide email. Marcus is announcing a special meeting tomorrow morning to discuss exciting structural changes and introduce Jeffrey Hammond as the new VP of Operations." My stomach dropped. Jeffrey Hammond was Marcus's college roommate, a man with zero construction experience whose previous job had been managing his family's car dealership. How convenient. The position wasn't even vacant when he hired my replacement. Through the glass walls, I could see HR representatives moving from desk to desk, likely sharing the news of my departure. 7 years of relationship building, of earning respect in a male-dominated industry, being dismantled in minutes. Some employees looked shocked, others confused. A few, I noticed, seemed completely unsurprised. I'd suspected this was coming for weeks. Since Dad's funeral, Marcus had been systematically excluding me from key meetings, rescheduling them when I was visiting project sites, making decisions without consulting me. But I'd never imagined he would actually fire me from the company our father had built from nothing, the company Dad had wanted us to run together. "Do you want me to call anyone?" Cynthia asked, helping me pack my awards into a cardboard box. "Maybe Jeremy in legal? This can't possibly be within company protocol." I shook my head, remembering the other changes Marcus had quietly made in recent weeks. Jeremy was let go last Friday, replaced by someone from Marcus's wife's family. Security guard appeared at my door, looking uncomfortable in his role. "Ms. Wright, I've been instructed to escort you from the building once you've collected your personal items," Cynthia gasped. "You can't be serious. This is Alexandra Wright." That guard avoided my eyes. "Just following orders, ma'am." I placed the last of my belongings in the box and straightened my spine. It's fine, Cynthia. Not his fault. I handed her my company keycard and phone. Please let the team know I didn't abandon them. I didn't choose this. She hugged me fiercely, whispering, "This isn't right. Your father would be furious." As the guard led me through the open office area, past stunned colleagues and toward the elevator, I felt a strange sense of clarity cutting through my shock and hurt. Dad had warned me this might happen. Marcus has always been jealous of our connection, he'd said during one of our final conversations. He sees the company as his birthright, not something to be shared. In the elevator, clutching my box of memories, I remembered the mysterious envelope Dad had mentioned. I hadn't opened it yet, partly out of grief and partly out of respect for his process. Dad had always been methodical, strategic. If he'd left me something in his safe, there was a specific time he'd intended for me to discover it. As the elevator doors opened to the lobby, I realized that time had arrived. Whatever was in that envelope, Dad had left it as my protection. And judging by the cold calculation of my dismissal, I was going to need it. The security guard walked me to my car, awkwardly trying to help with my box while maintaining his official demeanor. As I placed it in my trunk, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Changes were necessary for company growth. Nothing personal. We should talk when I'm back in town next week." Nothing personal. The dismissal of his own sister with a form letter, while he was skiing in Aspen, was nothing personal. 7 years of my life, dedicated to the company our father had built with his own hands, discarded as casually as yesterday's coffee cup. I started my car, a sense of determination replacing my initial shock. Marcus had always underestimated me, had always seen me as the little sister he could manipulate and control. He thought firing me was the end of the story. He was about to discover it was only the beginning. I drove straight from the Wright Construction headquarters to my father's house, our childhood home and now my residence since his passing. The sprawling craftsman-style house felt emptier than usual as I walked through the front door, my box of office belongings heavy in my arms. For a moment, I stood in the entryway, listening to the familiar creaking of the old hardwood floors, half expecting to hear Dad's booming voice calling from his study. The silence was my only answer. 3 months had passed since William Wright's sudden heart attack, but the house still felt like a museum to his life. His reading glasses still sat on the side table next to his favorite leather armchair. His collection of architectural books still lined the built-in shelves he'd crafted himself when I was a child. Even the faint scent of his pipe tobacco lingered in the curtains. I set my box down and moved toward his study, the room where I'd spent countless evenings as a child watching him review blueprints and contracts. The room where he'd first taught me how to read a construction schedule, how to calculate materials costs, how to see not just buildings, but the dreams they represented. The study door creaked open, revealing the dark wood paneling and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that had been my father's sanctuary. In the corner stood the heavy iron safe, a relic from the company's early days when Dad had kept the payroll cash inside before banks were trusted with the full week's wages. Trust no one, Alexandra, not even family. The envelope in my safe is your protection. His final advice, delivered with a fierce intensity that had seemed disproportionate at the time. Now I understood his urgency. I knelt before the safe, entering the combination, my birthday, followed by my mother's, who had passed away when I was 12. The heavy door swung open with a familiar groan. Inside were the expected items: Dad's will, though the official copy was with his attorney, some cash, the deed to the house, Mom's jewelry collection, old family photographs. And there, in the back corner, a thick manila envelope with my name written in Dad's distinctive architect's handwriting. My hands trembled slightly as I removed it, feeling the weight of whatever secrets it contained. I carried it to his desk, clearing a space among the blueprints that still lay open where he'd left them. Taking a deep breath, I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, several legal documents, and a USB drive. I unfolded the letter first, instantly comforted by the sight of Dad's handwriting. My dearest Alexandra, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and something has happened at the company to make you feel threatened or uncertain about your position. I've known Marcus longer than anyone, and while I love my son, I harbor no illusions about his character. His ambition has always outweighed his integrity. The frankness of his assessment made my throat tighten with emotion. Dad had always been diplomatic about Marcus's shortcomings, always trying to bridge the gap between us. What you hold in your hands is your rightful inheritance and your protection against any attempt to push you out of right construction. When I started the company 35 years ago, I did so with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox. Every success since then has been built on honesty, quality work, and treating people right. Values I see reflected in you, not your brother. I paused, overcome with emotion. Dad had rarely been so direct with his praise. The legal documents, enclosed, will explain the details. But here's what you need to know. While Marcus has been operating under the assumption that my 51% ownership would transfer to him upon my death, making him majority shareholder, that is not the case. I restructured the company ownership 5 years ago, after Marcus's disastrous handling of the riverfront project nearly bankrupted us. My eyes widened. The riverfront project had been Marcus's first major leadership role, a luxury condominium, development that had gone massively over budget due to his poor planning and excessive changes. Dad had stepped in and salvaged the project, but I'd never known the full extent of the damage. Under the revised ownership structure, my 51% share has been divided. Marcus retains his original 24% plus an additional 15% from my holdings, giving him 39% total. You currently hold 20% plus an additional 36% from my holdings, giving you 56% ownership of Right Construction. The remaining 5% is distributed among key longtime employees. I had to reread the paragraph twice to fully absorb its meaning. I wasn't just a significant shareholder, I was the majority owner of Right Construction. The company was mine. I kept this arrangement confidential to prevent unnecessary conflict while I was alive, hoping Marcus would mature into a leader worthy of the right name. I've watched with pride as you've risen through the company on your own merit, earning the respect of clients and employees alike, without ever trading on your name or connection to me. The documents confirmed everything: stock certificates, the updated corporate bylaws, board resolutions, all legally executed and notarized 5 years earlier. The USB drive contained digital copies of everything, plus years of emails and documented instances where Marcus had made significant errors in judgment that had cost the company money or reputation. I hope you never need to use this information. Defensively, Alexandra, in a perfect world, you and your brother would lead Right Construction together, combining his client relationships with your operational excellence. But I've lived too long and seen too much to believe in perfect worlds. I stood and moved to the window, looking out at the garden where Dad had taught me to plant tomatoes, to identify different types of soil, to understand that foundations, whether for buildings or lives, required proper preparation and materials. If the day comes when you must stand your ground, do so knowing you have both legal authority and moral right on your side. Right Construction's legacy isn't in its buildings, impressive as they may be. It's in its commitment to doing things the right way, even when that's the harder path. The letter continued with practical advice about key allies within the company, potential challenges I might face, and his unwavering belief in my abilities. It concluded simply, I am proud of the woman you've become, Alexandra. Whatever happens, next, trust your judgment. You were always the true builder in the family. All my love, Dad. As I carefully returned the documents to the envelope, my phone buzzed with messages from concerned colleagues who had just learned of my termination. The shock and betrayal I'd felt earlier began to transform into something more focused, more resolute. Marcus had fired the majority shareholder of the company. He just didn't know it yet. I slept fitfully that night, my mind racing with revelations and possibilities. By morning, I had made my decision. I wouldn't act immediately. Dad's strategic approach had always been to gather information first, understand the complete picture before making any moves. Marcus wasn't due back from Aspen for 3 more days, time I could use to assess the situation fully. After a strong cup of coffee, I called Cynthia. She answered on the first ring. "Alexandra, are you okay? Everyone's in shock. The office feels like a funeral home." "I'm managing," I replied. "What's happening there today?" "Chaos." Marcus held his meeting through video conference from Aspen. The disdain in her voice was evident. "Jeffrey Hammond was introduced as your replacement. He gave a speech about exciting new directions and untapped markets that made absolutely no sense. The construction managers looked ready to mutiny." "Any other changes announced?" "Several. 3 of the project managers who were loyal to you have been reassigned to smaller jobs. Maria from accounting was let go, and they're reviewing all current commercial contracts for profitability." I winced. The commercial division had been my creation, transforming Wright Construction from a residential builder to a respected commercial contractor capable of handling hospital and school construction. It was now the company's most profitable segment. "Who's overseeing the Davis Hospital expansion?" I asked, referring to our largest ongoing project. "Hammond claims he is, but he spent the morning asking basic questions about construction scheduling that any first-year employee would know. The project manager is panicking." I made notes as Cynthia continued reporting. Marcus wasn't just removing me. He was systematically dismantling everything I'd built within the company, replacing expertise with loyalty to him. "One more thing," Cynthia added, her voice dropping. "I overheard Hammond talking with Robert from legal. They're preparing to offer settlements to any subcontractors who want to exit their contracts early. Something about realigning our partnership. Strategy." That was concerning. We had relationships with skilled subcontractors that had taken years to develop. In construction, reliable subcontractors were more valuable than gold. Replacing them with unknown entities would put every project at risk. "Can you send me the company-wide emails and meeting notes for the past month?" "Use my personal email." "Already. Compiled them last night," Cynthia replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Check your inbox." After hanging up, I spent the morning reviewing everything Cynthia had sent. A disturbing pattern emerged. For weeks, Marcus had been laying groundwork, restricting access to financial information, rescheduling key client meetings when I was unavailable, creating a narrative of necessary change in his communications. My firing wasn't impulsive. It was the culmination of a carefully orchestrated plan. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Edward Chen, Wright Construction's chief financial officer and my father's close friend for 20 years. "I told them I had a dentist appointment," he said by way of greeting, stepping inside. "We need to talk." Edward had always been a precise man of few words, his attention to detail making him an exceptional CFO. Today, however, he looked uncharacteristically disheveled, his normally immaculate tie slightly askew. "Marcus asked me to sign off on some financial projections this morning that don't make sense," he explained as we settled in Dad's study. "He's presenting them to the bank next week as part of a loan application." "What kind of loan?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. $5 million for expansion opportunities. But the collateral he's offering includes assets the company doesn't fully own. And the revenue projections assume we'll win contracts we haven't even bid on yet. T frowned. "That sounds like fraud." "Borderline at best," Edward agreed. When I questioned the numbers, he reminded me that as CEO, he has final say on financial matters. He hesitated. "Alexandra, I've been with your father since the beginning. I can't put my name on documents I know aren't accurate." "You won't have to," I assured him, making a decision. "Edward, what I'm about to tell you must remain confidential for now. I explained the contents of my father's envelope, showing him the ownership documents. Edward examined them carefully, his accountant's eye missing nothing. "Your father mentioned he had made arrangements," he said finally. "But I didn't know the specifics." He looked up, a faint smile forming. "This changes everything." "Not yet," I cautioned. "I need to understand exactly what Marcus is planning before I make any moves. Dad always said timing was everything in business." Edward nodded. "Wise approach. The loan application isn't scheduled for review until next Wednesday. That gives us time." "Us?" "I'm with you, Alexandra. So are others. Your father inspired loyalty for a reason, and it wasn't just the paycheck." He straightened his tie, his professional demeanor returning. "What do you need from me?" "Complete financial records for the past 6 months. I need to know what Marcus has been doing with company resources." "You'll have them tonight. Anything else?" I hesitated. "The current project managers. How are they feeling about the new direction?" Edward's expression turned grim. "Confused. Concerned. Hammond has no construction experience. The Peterson Hospital project has specific medical facility requirements that he doesn't understand. They're worried about quality control, safety protocols, delivery timelines." This confirmed my worst fears. Marcus wasn't just pushing me out. He was placing the company itself in jeopardy with unqualified leadership. After Edward left, I paced the study, my thoughts crystallizing into a plan. Marcus had always underestimated me, viewing my methodical approach as indecisiveness. He expected me to retreat, lick my wounds, perhaps hire an attorney to negotiate a settlement. He would never anticipate a direct confrontation. I opened my laptop and began reviewing the corporate bylaws that governed Wright Construction. As majority shareholder, I had significant powers I had never needed to invoke while Dad was alive. According to Section 7.3, I could call an emergency board meeting with 48 hours' notice if I had evidence of actions potentially harmful to the company. The fraudulent loan application would qualify. I drafted the formal notice, specifying the next Monday, when Marcus would be back from Aspen, and the time. I included the stark language from the bylaws about gross mismanagement and fiduciary misconduct that justified the emergency session. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I sent this, there would be no turning back. Marcus would immediately realize something was happening, though he wouldn't yet know the full extent of what I knew. I thought of Dad's words. "Trust your judgment. You were always the true builder in the family." I clicked send. The response was immediate and ferocious. Within 20 minutes of sending the meeting notice, my phone exploded with notifications. First, a terse email from Marcus. "What the hell is this? You have no authority to call board meetings." Then a more official message from Robert, the new legal counsel. "Please be advised that as a minority shareholder without board appointment, you cannot convene official company meetings." They thought I was bluffing, operating from a position of weakness. Their assumption would be their downfall. I didn't respond to either message, instead continuing my methodical preparation. Throughout the afternoon, Edward sent financial records in batches, each more concerning than the last. Marcus had been siphoning company resources for months, authorizing excessive consulting fees to shell companies I couldn't trace, approving inflated expense accounts for himself and his allies, and most alarmingly, selling off valuable equipment at below-market rates to a competitor with whom he appeared to have personal connections. Around 6 in the evening, my doorbell rang again. This time it was Maria Rodriguez, the accountant who'd been let go that morning. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her expression was determined. "Cynthia told me you might be able to use this," she said, handing me a flash drive. I made copies before they escorted me out. Inside my father's study, Maria explained as, "We reviewed the files together. 3 months ago, right after your father passed, Marcus asked me to create separate accounting codes for certain transactions. He said it was for executive strategic initiatives that needed to be tracked separately. The files revealed a secondary set of books, not exactly hidden but obscured through creative categorization. Money that should have gone toward project costs was being redirected to these strategic initiatives without clear justification. I questioned it last week, Maria continued. That's why I was fired. Did you keep records of those conversations? She nodded. Emails, meeting notes. I documented everything. By nightfall, my dining room table had become command central, covered with financial documents, corporate bylaws, and legal notes. 4 more employees had visited, each bringing pieces of evidence showing Marcus's systematic dismantling of Dad's business principles. Pat Jenkins, our veteran safety coordinator, brought documentation of safety inspections being postponed to speed up project timelines. Michael Torres, a project manager, provided emails showing Marcus had authorized substituting lower quality materials than what was specified in client contracts. A pattern of not just mismanagement but potentially criminal misconduct was emerging. At 9:42 p.m., my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Alexandra. Right? A woman's voice, unfamiliar but confident. Yes? Who's this? Diane Winters, Davis Memorial Hospital board member. We haven't met, but you've been our primary contact on the expansion project. The hospital was our largest client, a $28 million expansion that would secure Wright Construction's reputation as a premier medical facility builder. Of course, Ms. Winters. What can I do for you? I received a concerning call today from someone named Jeffrey Hammond, claiming he's taking over our project. He couldn't answer basic questions about medical gas systems or the specialized HVAC requirements for surgical suites. The disapproval in her voice was evident. When I asked to speak with you instead, I was told you were no longer with the company. I maintained my professional tone, despite the anger flaring inside me. That's correct. My position was eliminated yesterday as part of a company restructuring. Restructuring. She repeated the word with obvious skepticism. Ms. Wright, I don't mean to pry into internal company matters, but our board selected Wright Construction, specifically because of your expertise with healthcare facilities. This project involves patient safety, not just aesthetics. I understand your concerns completely. Our contract includes a key personnel clause. Your direct involvement was a condition of our agreement. Her voice hardened slightly. We're considering this a potential material breach. This was worse than I'd feared. The hospital could legally terminate the contract if key personnel, namely me, were removed without adequate replacement. The financial penalties would be devastating, not to mention the reputational damage. Ms. Winters, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. The situation at Wright Construction is evolving. Could I ask for 5 business days before you take any formal action? There was a pause. Your father built his reputation on honesty and competence, Ms. Wright. Out of respect for him, I'll bring your request to the board, but we'll need answers by the end of next week. After thanking her, I immediately called Edward to relay the conversation. It's not just Davis Hospital, he confirmed grimly. I've heard from 3 other clients today with similar concerns. Marcus doesn't understand that construction is a relationship business. These clients trusted you and your father, not just the company name. By midnight, I had compiled enough evidence to make my case ironclad. Marcus hadn't just fired me improperly. He was actively endangering the company through incompetent leadership and questionable financial decisions. The emergency board meeting was fully justified. As I finally prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. This tantrum is embarrassing. You're making things worse for yourself. Board meeting canceled. We'll discuss severance when I return. His arrogance was breathtaking. He truly believed he held all the power, that I was merely an irritant to be brushed aside. For a moment, I considered revealing my majority ownership immediately, just to see his reaction. But Dad's strategic approach prevailed in my thinking. Element of surprise, position of strength, complete preparation. Instead, I simply replied, "The meeting stands. Monday, 10 a.m. I slept surprisingly well that night, a sense of calm purpose having replaced my initial shock and hurt. In the morning, I met with James Patterson, Dad's personal attorney who had handled the ownership restructuring 5 years ago. After reviewing, "My evidence and strategy," he nodded approvingly. "Your father would be proud," he said. "You're handling this exactly as he would have, methodically, legally, and with the long-term health of the company as your priority." His words strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about my position or even revenge against Marcus. It was about preserving what Dad had built, the company culture he had created, the reputation for integrity he had established over decades. Marcus had declared war on that legacy. He was about to discover he'd chosen the wrong battlefield. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and strategic planning. By Sunday evening, I had created 3 distinct documents: a comprehensive financial analysis revealing Marcus's questionable transactions, a legal brief outlining my majority ownership status and rights, and a detailed business plan for stabilizing the company after the inevitable leadership transition. I sat at my father's desk, methodically organizing everything into folders. The morning's confrontation would change Wright Construction forever. Beyond the shock value of revealing my majority ownership, I needed a clear path forward that would reassure employees, clients, and partners that the company remained stable and committed to its founding principles. My phone buzzed with a text from Cynthia. "Hammond is panicking. He spent all weekend calling project managers, making promises he can't keep. 3 are threatening to quit. Davis Hospital called again with concerns." I wasn't surprised. Jeffrey Hammond was unqualified and out of his depth, exactly why Marcus had chosen him. A competent VP would have questioned Marcus's decisions. Hammond would simply follow orders without understanding their implications. "Tell them to hold off on any decisions until after tomorrow's meeting," I replied. As I continued preparing, I created a detailed assessment of the company's current state: assets, strong reputation built over 35 years, skilled workforce, with low turnover, profitable commercial division, 8 major projects currently underway, debt-to-equity ratio better than industry average, strategic land holdings for future development. Liabilities, leadership crisis undermining client confidence, fraudulent loan application pending, safety protocols potentially compromised, subcontractor relationships at risk, pending litigation from one residential client, predating Marcus's takeover, cash flow temporarily constrained due to equipment, sales. I also listed the key personnel I would need to stabilize operations immediately: Edward Chen as CFO, Maria Rodriguez reinstated in accounting, Pat Jenkins overseeing safety compliance, Michael Torres leading the Davis Hospital project, and a few others who combined technical expertise with personal integrity. Around midnight, I opened my father's safe again, retrieving his worn, leather-bound journal. He had maintained it throughout his career, documenting business insights, leadership philosophies, and practical construction knowledge. I turned to the passages he'd highlighted for me years ago when I first joined the company. "A construction company builds more than structures," he'd written. "It builds trust. Without trust, the finest materials and most advanced techniques mean nothing. Every decision must reinforce that trust, with clients, with employees, with the community." His words reinforced my resolve. What Marcus was doing wasn't just personally painful. It threatened the very foundation of what made Wright Construction successful. At 6:30 a.m. Monday morning, I awoke to another text from Marcus. "Meeting canceled due to lack of proper authorization. Security has been instructed not to admit you. To the building. Call my assistant to discuss exit package." I smiled slightly at his desperate attempt to maintain control. He still had no idea what was coming. I dressed with deliberate care, a charcoal gray suit that had been a gift from my father when I secured my first major commercial contract, pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother, sensible but polished black heels. Professional, authoritative, confident. Before leaving, I placed a call to James Patterson, confirming he would meet me at the Wright construction offices. Then I contacted the 4 board members Dad had appointed years ago, respected industry, figures who served primarily in an advisory capacity but held actual voting powers. All confirmed they would attend either in person or virtually, curious about the emergency meeting that had created such a stir. As I drove toward the company headquarters, I mentally reviewed my approach. I would not lead with emotion or accusations. Facts, documentation, and a clear vision for moving forward would be my weapons. Marcus would attempt to discredit me through dismissal and derision, his usual tactics when feeling threatened. I needed to remain composed, regardless of what was said. The parking lot was unusually full when I arrived. Word of the meeting had clearly spread, creating a mixture of curiosity and tension. As predicted, a security guard I didn't recognize stood at the main entrance, consulting a tablet as employees entered. I approached confidently, noticing James Patterson waiting nearby, briefcase in hand. "Ms. Wright," the guard said uncomfortably, "I'm afraid I can't allow you to enter. Orders from CEO Wright." I smiled pleasantly. "I understand you're just doing your job. However, as a shareholder calling an emergency board meeting under Section 7.3 of the corporate bylaws, denying me access would constitute interference with corporate governance, exposing both Wright Construction and you personally to potential legal liability." The guard blinked, clearly not having anticipated this response. James stepped forward, extending his business card. "James Patterson, legal counsel. I can provide documentation of Ms. Wright's standing if necessary. But I suggest you contact your supervisor rather than creating a situation that could result in litigation." The guard hesitated, then reached for his radio. After a brief hushed conversation, he reluctantly stepped aside. "Mr. Wright says to escort you directly to the conference room." As we walked through the open office area, conversations halted. Employees stared with mixtures of surprise, hope, and concern. I maintained my professional demeanor, nodding acknowledgments but saving my focus for what lay ahead. The main conference room, named the William Wright Boardroom after my father, was already half full when we arrived. Edward Chen sat at one end, looking surprisingly composed. 2 board members were engaged in quiet conversation near the windows. Jeffrey Hammond hovered uncertainly near the refreshment table, his expression betraying his discomfort in this high-stakes environment. And there, at the head of the table in our father's former seat, sat Marcus. His aspen tan contrasted with the thunderous expression on his face. He didn't stand as I entered, instead demonstratively checking his watch. "You're wasting everyone's time, Alexandra," he announced loudly. "This meeting has no official standing." "On the contrary," I replied calmly, setting my briefcase on the table. "As a shareholder of Wright Construction, I've called this emergency meeting in accordance with Section 7.3 of our corporate bylaws, citing evidence of actions potentially harmful to the company." "Minority shareholders don't have that authority," Marcus countered, signaling to Robert, his legal counsel. "And former employees definitely don't." I allowed myself a small smile as I removed the first document from my briefcase. "That's where you're wrong, Marcus. On both counts." The conference room fell silent as I began distributing copies of the ownership documents. James Patterson moved beside me, the steady presence of legal authority reinforcing each motion. As the papers circulated around the table, I watched the expressions change: confusion, disbelief, and in Edward's case, the slightest hint of satisfaction. These documents confirm that following our father's restructuring of company ownership 5 years ago, I hold 56% of Wright Construction shares, making me the majority shareholder, I stated, my voice even and calm despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Marcus holds 39%, with the remaining 5% distributed among key employees. Marcus snatched a copy, his face flushing as he scanned the pages. This is impossible. Dad promised me majority control. We discussed it for years. Perhaps he led you to believe that, I acknowledged. But legally, these are the binding ownership records, properly filed with the state and reflected in the company's official documents. Marcus turned to Robert, who was frantically flipping through the papers. Tell me this isn't legitimate. Robert's discomfort was evident as he examined the notary seals and signatures. I would need time to verify, but these appear to be authentic corporate documents. They are authentic, James Patterson confirmed. As William Wright's personal attorney for 30 years, I oversaw this restructuring myself. He was quite clear about his intentions. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. This is a manipulation, a last-minute change he made when he was sick and not thinking clearly. The restructuring was executed 5 years ago, I corrected, sliding the dated documentation toward the board members. When Dad was in perfect health and after the riverfront project nearly bankrupted the company due to mismanagement. The mention of the riverfront fiasco caused Marcus to flinch. The 2 original board members exchanged knowing glances. They remembered that disaster all too well. Even if these papers are legitimate, which I don't concede, Marcus countered, it doesn't change the fact that I'm the CEO. The board appointed me after Dad's death. The board appointed you based on incomplete information, I replied. They weren't informed of the true ownership structure, nor were they aware of the financial irregularities that have occurred since you took control. I nodded to Edward, who distributed the financial analysis I had prepared. As the documents made their way around the table, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. The 3rd board member, who had arrived during our exchange, removed his glasses to study the figures more closely. These transactions, Edward explained, pointing to highlighted sections, show systematic diversion of company resources over the past 3 months. Consulting fees to entities that have no verifiable business relationship with Wright Construction. Equipment sold at 40% below market value to Summit Development, a company where Marcus's brother-in-law serves as operations director. Marcus's face had gone from flush to pale. These were strategic business decisions to generate quick capital for expansion opportunities. Without board approval or proper disclosure, I noted. And there's more. I distributed the 3rd document, the loan application with its fraudulent revenue projections and misrepresented collateral. This loan application, scheduled for submission to First National Bank tomorrow, contains materially false information about the company's financial position and collateral assets. The board members looked increasingly disturbed as they reviewed the paperwork. Barbara Winters, a retired contractor who had been my father's friend for decades, shook her head in obvious disappointment. Based on these documents, I continued, I move for an immediate vote on the following items. 1. Recognition of the actual ownership structure with myself as majority shareholder. 2. Removal of Marcus Wright as CEO for breach of fiduciary duty. 3. Appointment of an interim leadership team to stabilize operations. You can't do this, Marcus sputtered, looking desperately around the table for allies. His gaze settled on Jeffrey Hammond, who had remained conspicuously silent throughout the proceedings. Jeff, tell them about our expansion plans, the opportunities we've identified. Hammond shifted uncomfortably. I'm still getting up to speed on those details. Of course you are, I said, not unkindly, because you have no construction experience and were hired solely for your loyalty to Marcus, not your qualifications. I turned my attention back to the board members. Wright Construction's reputation was built on expertise, integrity, and quality work. In 3 months under Marcus's leadership, we've lost key personnel, alienated major clients, compromised safety standards, and are on the verge of financial misconduct that could result in criminal charges. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is a hostile takeover. My own sister stabbing me in the back. This is accountability, I corrected, maintaining my composure. Dad built this company from nothing through honesty and hard work. I won't stand by and watch you destroy it through greed and incompetence. The oldest board member, Richard Coleman, cleared his throat. I've heard enough to warrant serious concern. I move we proceed with Ms. Wright's proposed vote. Seconded, Barbara Winters added immediately. Marcus looked around wildly, finally fixing his gaze on Robert. As legal counsel, you need to stop this. It's not procedurally correct. Robert appeared deeply uncomfortable. Actually, the bylaws are quite clear. If the documentation of ownership is accurate, Ms. Wright has the authority to call this meeting and propose these measures. This is illegal, Marcus insisted, his voice rising. I'll sue all of you personally. You're welcome to pursue that option, James Patterson replied calmly. However, I should note that legal action would require discovery, which would expose all of these financial irregularities to public scrutiny and potentially to regulatory authorities. The implied threat hung in the air. Marcus wasn't just facing loss of control, he was potentially facing legal consequences for his actions. I suggest we proceed with the vote, I said quietly. Richard Coleman nodded. All in favor of recognizing Alexandra Wright as majority shareholder with 56% ownership, please indicate by raising your hand. One by one, hands went up around the table. Edward Chen, the 3 board members present in the room. The 4th board member, visible on the video conference screen, also raised his hand. Only Marcus, Robert, and Jeffrey Hammond abstained. Motion carries, Coleman announced. Next, the removal of Marcus Wright as Chief Executive Officer for breach of fiduciary duty and actions potentially harmful to the company. The vote followed the same pattern, with Marcus growing visibly more agitated as his position crumbled before his eyes. Finally, the appointment of an interim leadership team to stabilize operations, with Alexandra Wright serving as acting CEO until a permanent structure can be established. As the final votes were tallied, Marcus suddenly lunged across the table, grabbing the ownership documents. This is forgery. It has to be. Dad would never do this to me. I met his gaze steadily. He didn't do anything to you, Marcus. He made a business decision to protect the company he spent his life building, the company you were willing to sacrifice for your own gain. For a moment, I saw something flicker in my brother's eyes. Not just anger, but a profound disbelief that his sense of entitlement could be challenged, that his birthright could be based on merit rather than gender or birth order. Security will escort you to your office to collect personal belongings, I said quietly. Your company credentials and access have been deactivated, effective immediately. You'll regret this, he hissed, his composure finally breaking completely. You have no idea how to run this company. I gathered my documents with steady hands. On the contrary, Marcus, I've been running the operational heart of this company for years while you were taking clients to golf tournaments. The difference is, now I'll be doing it with the authority I've earned. Marcus stormed out of the boardroom, followed hastily by Jeffrey Hammond and Robert. Through the glass walls, I could see employees watching with undisguised curiosity as security met them in the hallway. The whispers had already begun, the office grapevine activating at lightning speed. I turned back to face the board members, who were regarding me with expressions ranging from cautious approval to outright concern. I realize this is sudden, I acknowledged, maintaining my professional demeanor despite the emotional turbulence beneath. But I want to assure you that my priority is stabilizing the company and preserving the legacy my father built. Richard, Coleman, who had known my father for over 30 years, leaned forward. Alexandra, while I supported this necessary action, I have to ask, do you have a concrete plan moving forward? Removing Marcus is one thing. Leading the company through this transition is another matter entirely. It was a fair question, and exactly what I had prepared for. I distributed copies of my third document, the detailed business stabilization plan. My immediate priorities are threefold, I explained, moving to the presentation screen and bringing up the first slide of my prepared materials. First, reassuring our clients that their projects will continue without disruption. Second, reinstating key personnel who were improperly terminated. And third, correcting the financial irregularities before they cause lasting damage. Edward Chen nodded approvingly as he reviewed the document. This addresses the most pressing concerns. The Davis Hospital situation in particular needs immediate attention. I've already spoken with Diane Winters from their board, I confirmed. I'll be meeting with them tomorrow to personally assure them that I'll be directly overseeing their project again, in accordance with our contract. Barbara Winters, who had extensive experience with leadership transitions in her own construction career, studied me carefully. This plan is sound, but executing it will be challenging. Marcus has created significant disruption in a very short time. Some damage may not be easily reversed. I'm aware of that, I acknowledged. Which is why I've prepared contingency approaches for our most vulnerable projects and client relationships. I switched to the next slide, displaying a risk assessment matrix with mitigation strategies for each high-risk area. For the next hour, we worked through the plan methodically, the initial shock of the confrontation giving way to practical business. Discussion. The board members asked pointed questions, suggested refinements, and occasionally challenged my assumptions, exactly the kind of rigorous oversight my father had valued when he appointed them. By the time we concluded, a tentative confidence had emerged. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it was clear and actionable. The board unanimously approved my appointment as interim CEO with a 3-month initial term, after which we would reassess based on company stability and performance metrics. As the board members filed out, Richard paused at the door. Your father faced a similar crisis early in the company's history, you know. A partner who wanted to take shortcuts, compromise quality for quick profits. He smiled slightly. William handled it with the same methodical thoroughness you've shown today. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. His words warmed me, providing unexpected validation at a moment when I needed it most. The confrontation with Marcus had been necessary but deeply painful, a public fracturing of family bonds that could never be fully repaired. Once alone in the boardroom, I allowed myself a moment to process what had just occurred. In the span of 5 days, I had gone from terminated vice president to CEO and majority owner. The responsibility was enormous, the expectations daunting. For a brief instant, doubt crept in. Could I truly fill my father's shoes? Then I recalled his confidence in me, his deliberate choice to place the company's future in my hands rather than Marcus's. He had believed in me without reservation. Now I needed to honor that belief with action. I took a deep breath and stepped out into the main office area. The murmuring conversations immediately ceased as dozens of eyes turned toward me. These people, many who had worked alongside me for years, were now looking to me for leadership, for certainty in a moment of upheaval. I know you've all witnessed some unusual events this morning, I began, my voice steady. There has been a change in leadership at Wright Construction. Marcus Wright is no longer CEO. As majority shareholder, I have assumed the role of interim CEO with full board approval. Whispers rippled through the gathering crowd. I held up a hand, continuing before speculation could take root. Wright Construction was founded on principles of quality, integrity, and treating people right, both clients and employees. Those values haven't changed, and under my leadership, they will once again be our guiding principles. Cynthia stepped forward from the group. What about the people who were let go? Maria, Jeremy, others? They will be offered reinstatement immediately, I confirmed. Those who choose to return will receive back pay for the time they missed. Additionally, all project reassignments made in the past week will be reviewed and, in most cases, reversed. The tension in the room visibly eased. Several employees exchanged relieved glances. I'll be meeting individually with department heads. Throughout the day, I continued. By tomorrow, everyone will have a clear understanding of our path forward. In the meantime, I ask for your patience and your focus on the work at hand. Our clients deserve nothing less. As the group dispersed, Edward approached with a stack of documents requiring immediate attention. The bank called about the loan application. I've put them off temporarily, but we'll need to address it today. Withdraw it completely, I instructed. We'll reassess our capital needs once we have accurate financials. I spent the remainder of the morning in back-to-back meetings, first with the project managers to stabilize our most critical jobs, then with the accounting team to begin untangling Marcus's financial maneuvers. By early afternoon, I had relocated to the CEO's office, my father's former space, which Marcus had immediately claimed after his death. The room felt wrong somehow. Marcus had removed Dad's architectural awards, replacing them with modern art that held no connection to our industry. The worn leather chair where I'd sat countless times discussing projects with my father was gone, substituted with a sleek ergonomic model that looked impressive but felt cold and impersonal. Maria Rodriguez, now reinstated to her accounting position, appeared at the door with another stack of troubling financial records. We've identified 17 irregular transactions in the past month alone, she reported, including these checks to Summit Development that bypass our normal approval process. I examined the documents, a knot forming in my stomach. The financial web Marcus had spun was more complex than I'd initially realized. How long will it take to get a complete picture of our current financial position? With the entire accounting team working on it? 3 days for a preliminary assessment, perhaps a week for the full analysis? I nodded. Make it the priority. We need to know exactly where we stand. As Maria departed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source, Marcus's wife, Vanessa. We need to talk. Not about business. It's personal. Dinner tonight? I hesitated, instinctively wary of any communication from Marcus's camp. Vanessa and I had never been close. She had always aligned herself firmly with Marcus in family matters. But the message specified not about business, suggesting something else was at play. After careful consideration, I replied, "The Lakeside Grill, 7 p.m. The afternoon continued in a blur of activity, calls to nervous clients, meetings with subcontractors, reviewing pending contracts. By 6 o'clock, I had made significant progress in stabilizing the most immediate concerns, but the magnitude of the cleanup operation was becoming clearer with each passing hour. Marcus had done tremendous damage in a very short time. As I prepared to leave for my dinner with Vanessa, Cynthia appeared with a small box. Found this in storage. Thought you might want it back in here. Inside was my father's old desk clock, a simple brass piece that had sat on his desk for as long as I could remember. I placed it carefully on the desk, its quiet ticking a comforting reminder of his methodical, patient approach to business and life. One day at a time, he used to say when facing seemingly insurmountable challenges. Break it down into manageable pieces, solve each one thoroughly, and eventually you'll find you've conquered the mountain. Looking around at the mountain of challenges Marcus had left in his wake, I drew strength from my father's wisdom. One day at a time, one problem at a time. With each solution, the mountain would diminish, the company would recover. I would make certain of it. The Lakeside Grill occupied the top floor of one of the city's older buildings, offering panoramic views of the water and a discreet atmosphere that made it popular for business meetings and confidential conversations. I arrived 15 minutes early, requesting a corner table that would afford us privacy while still allowing me to observe the entire restaurant. A precaution in case this meeting wasn't what it purported to be. Vanessa arrived precisely at 7, looking elegantly, understated in a navy dress that contrasted with her usual flashy style. Her expression was guarded as she approached the table, tension visible in the set of her shoulders. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I was curious," I admitted. "We haven't exactly been close," she nodded, a flicker of what might have been remorse crossing her features. "That's partly why I wanted to talk. Today's events, they've forced me to reconsider many things." The waiter appeared with water and menus. We ordered quickly, neither of us particularly focused on food, before returning to the uncomfortable silence between us. "Marcus doesn't know I'm here," Vanessa finally said, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her water glass. "He's been unstable since the meeting, alternating between rage and bizarre optimism about legal options that don't exist." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely meaning it despite everything. Marcus was still my brother, and his downfall brought me no joy, only a sense of necessary justice. "He's meeting with lawyers right now, convinced he can overturn everything." She sighed, looking suddenly exhausted. "But that's not why I wanted to see you." She reached into her purse and withdrew a small leather journal. "I found this in Marcus's home office while he was out. I think you should have it." I accepted the journal cautiously, immediately recognizing my father's handwriting on the first page I glimpsed. "This is Dad's." "One of his journals?" "Yes. Marcus took it from your father's study the day after the funeral. He was looking for anything that might give him an advantage in taking control of the company." I leafed through the pages, discovering it was from the period 5 years earlier, exactly when Dad had restructured the company ownership. The entries detailed his growing concerns about Marcus's business judgment, his relief when I successfully salvaged the riverfront project, and his deliberations about the future leadership of Wright Construction. "I've suspected for some time that Marcus wasn't being honest about certain things," Vanessa continued, her voice lowered. "But until today, I never realized the extent of it." I studied her carefully, searching for deception or hidden motives. "Why are you showing me this now?" She met my gaze directly. "Because I'm leaving him, Alexandra. After what I witnessed today, his complete disregard for ethics, for legality, for basic decency, I can't stand beside him anymore. And I won't be complicit in whatever he's planning next." "What is he planning?" I asked, suddenly alert. "I don't know specifically, but he made a call to James Harrington after the meeting." The name sent a chill through me. James Harrington owned Harrington Construction, our primary competitor and a company known for aggressive, sometimes questionable business tactics. "Marcus has been in discussions with Harrington for weeks," Vanessa continued. "I overheard pieces of conversations, references to after the transition, and once I have full control. I think he was planning to sell off parts of Wright Construction, possibly merge with Harrington under terms that would benefit him personally." The revelation stunned me. Not just financial irregularities or poor management, but actively planning to dismantle the company our father had built. It was a betrayal beyond what I'd imagined. "There's more," Vanessa added, lowering her voice further. "The equipment sales to Summit Development. It wasn't just because of his brother-in-law's position there. Marcus has a hidden ownership stake in Summit. They're positioning to take over Wright's residential construction contracts." My mind raced, connecting dots I hadn't previously seen. The equipment sold at below-market rates, the mysterious consulting fees, the sudden interest in restructuring our residential division. It all pointed to a systematic plan to hollow outright construction from within, transferring its most valuable assets and relationships to entities that would benefit Marcus personally. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, still cautious about her motives. Vanessa looked down at her barely touched meal. "My father was a small contractor in Pittsburgh. He lost everything when a larger company used similar tactics against him. Undercut his bids, poached his employees, then bought his equipment for pennies on the dollar when he couldn't make payroll. He never recovered. Her voice grew quieter. I watched what that did to him. I can't be part of inflicting that on others, especially not your father's legacy. Our food arrived, creating a momentary pause in the conversation. As the waiter departed, Vanessa continued, "There's something else you should know. Last month, Marcus approached 3 of your key project managers about leaving Wright to join a new venture. He promised equity stakes, higher salaries, guaranteed contracts." "Which project managers?" I asked, mentally reviewing our leadership team. Daniels, Perez, and Stevens. I nodded slowly. All 3 managed major commercial projects, exactly the division I had built, and apparently the one Marcus most wanted to dismantle. Did they agree? Perez refused outright. The others were non-committal, waiting to see how things evolved. She hesitated. Marcus was planning to fire you after the Davis Hospital project wrapped up. He only accelerated the timeline when he discovered you'd been meeting with clients directly, bypassing the new procedures he'd implemented. The pieces continued falling into place. Marcus hadn't just wanted me out of the company. He'd wanted to neutralize my influence, my relationships, my division's success. Anything that contradicted his narrative of being the rightful heir to Dad's business legacy. "I appreciate you sharing this," I said carefully. "But I have to ask, what do you want in return?" Vanessa looked genuinely surprised. "Nothing. This isn't a negotiation or a play for advantage. I'm leaving Marcus, filing for divorce as soon as my lawyer prepares the papers. She paused, struggling for words. "I need to do something right in all this mess. Something my father would have been proud of." For the first time, I saw Vanessa clearly. Not as Marcus's wife or an extension of his ambitions, but as someone caught in a situation that had spiraled beyond what she had signed up for, making the difficult choice to extricate herself with her integrity intact. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Start over. I have family in Colorado, a sister who's been encouraging me to move closer for years." A faint smile crossed her face. "Maybe I'll finally finish my degree in environmental design. Before I met Marcus, that was my passion." As our dinner concluded, Vanessa handed me one final item, a USB drive containing copies of emails and documents she'd collected from Marcus's home computer. "It's not comprehensive, but it should help you understand what you're dealing with. And," she hesitated, "if legal proceedings become necessary, I'm willing to provide a statement about what I witnessed." We parted with an awkward but genuine handshake, not quite friends, but no longer adversaries. As I watched her walk away, I felt a complex mixture of gratitude for her unexpected alliance and sorrow for the family fractures that continued to widen. The Wright family was splintering in ways that might never be repaired. Back in my car, I examined my father's journal more closely. One entry in particular caught my attention. "Watched Alexandra present the hospital project proposal today. Her thoroughness, her grasp of both technical details and client psychology, her ability to anticipate questions before they're asked. It reminds me of myself at my best, but with a patience I never mastered. Marcus has charisma and ambition, valuable traits in the right measure. But Alexandra has something rarer: wisdom. She understands that construction isn't just about buildings. It's about the people who will inhabit them, the communities they'll serve, the trust required to bring complex visions to life. I've made my decision about the company's future. Some will call it unfair, perhaps even Marcus will eventually. But leadership isn't a birthright. It's earned through demonstrated character and competence. Alexandra has earned her place." My father's words brought tears to my eyes, not just for his confidence in me, but for his clear-eyed assessment of both his children, his willingness to make difficult decisions based on what was best for the company rather than what was expected or easy. I started the car, determination replacing emotional exhaustion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, potentially including whatever counterattack Marcus was planning with Harrington. But tonight, I had gained critical intelligence and unexpected allies. The way forward remained difficult, but increasingly clear. As I drove home through the darkened city streets, past buildings my father had constructed over his decades in the industry, I made a silent promise to him and to myself. Wright Construction wouldn't just survive this crisis. It would emerge stronger, more aligned with its founding principles, more worthy of the legacy he had entrusted to me. I arrived at the Wright Construction offices at 6:30 the next morning, determined to get ahead of the day's challenges before the regular workforce arrived. The information Vanessa had provided demanded immediate attention, particularly the connection between Marcus and James Harrington. The early hour gave me the quiet I needed to think strategically. I began by examining the USB drive, methodically, sorting through email exchanges, calendar entries, and financial spreadsheets. The evidence was damning. For at least 4 months, beginning shortly before our father's death, Marcus had been in regular communication with Harrington, discussing what they euphemistically called a strategic partnership opportunity. In reality, the documents outlined a plan to divest Wright Construction of its most valuable assets while creating the illusion of a merger. One document particularly chilled me, a spreadsheet titled Retention Assessment with every Wright employee categorized as keep, evaluate, or release. My name, unsurprisingly, topped the release column, but so did many of our most experienced project managers and skilled laborers. People who had dedicated decades to Wright Construction had been reduced to disposable assets in Marcus's calculations. By 8 a.m., I had compiled a comprehensive brief of the Marcus Harrington connection and summoned Edward Chen for an urgent consultation. As CFO, Edward would understand the financial implications better than anyone. "This goes beyond poor judgment into potential criminal territory," Edward observed, reviewing the materials with growing concern. "The equipment sales to Summit Development, that's self-dealing. And these discussions with Harrington while acting as CEO, without board disclosure? Clear breach of fiduciary duty." "What's our exposure?" I asked, focusing on practical implications rather than moral outrage. Edward adjusted his glasses, thinking carefully. "Financially, we can recover from the equipment sales by pursuing legal remedies against both Marcus and Summit. The bigger risk is reputational damage and client confidence. If word gets out that our former CEO was planning to essentially dismantle the company from within, we need to get ahead of the narrative," I concluded. "And we need to secure our key contracts, personnel, and relationships before Marcus and Harrington can implement whatever they're planning next." I spent the morning in targeted damage control, first meeting with our legal team to initiate recovery proceedings for the undervalued equipment sales, then holding individual conversations with the 3 project managers Marcus had approached about leaving. Perez confirmed his loyalty immediately. Daniels admitted considering Marcus's offer, but assured me he was now committed to staying. Stevens was more guarded, requesting time to assess the new leadership structure, a response that warranted careful monitoring. By midday, I had arranged an emergency meeting with our banking partners to address the fraudulent loan application and establish new financial oversight procedures. The bank representatives were initially alarmed, but ultimately reassured by our transparent approach to the situation. "We value our 30-year relationship with Wright Construction," the senior loan officer acknowledged. "Your father's reputation for integrity means something to this institution. We appreciate your forthright handling of this matter." As the day progressed, I maintained a careful balance between addressing Marcus's damage and moving the company forward. I personally called our 5 largest clients, assuring them of continuity in their projects and inviting them to one-on-one meetings to address any concerns. The Davis Hospital Board received special attention, I scheduled an on-site visit for the following morning to review progress and re-establish the trust that had been compromised. Around 3 p.m., I received an unexpected visitor, James Harrington, himself, arriving without appointment and insisting on seeing me immediately. I instructed security to escort him to the conference room rather than my office, a subtle but deliberate choice that positioned our meeting as formal business rather than casual conversation. Harrington was a study in calculated affability. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the practiced charm of someone accustomed to getting his way through personality rather than merit. His handshake was firm, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Alexandra, James Harrington, I don't believe we've had the pleasure, though I knew your father well. Formidable competitor, wonderful man. I maintained professional courtesy while establishing clear boundaries. Mr. Harrington, what brings you to Wright Construction today?" He settled into a chair without waiting for invitation. "I heard about yesterday's executive transition. Thought I'd extend an olive branch, see if we might continue the discussions your brother and I had been having about potential collaboration between our companies." His casual reference to Marcus's removal as an executive transition and immediate pivot to continuing their plans revealed either remarkable audacity or profound misjudgment of the situation. Perhaps both. "I'm familiar with those discussions, Mr. Harrington, including the details not disclosed to our board or shareholders." I maintained steady eye contact, watching his reaction carefully. A flicker of surprise crossed his features before his practiced smile returned. Business development conversations are often preliminary, exploratory. Marcus was simply investigating options for Wright's future growth. I placed a printed copy of one of their email exchanges on the table between us, specifically, a message, where Harrington had outlined how they would extract maximum value from Wright assets while minimizing severance obligations through strategic terminations. "This doesn't read like growth strategy, Mr. Harrington. It reads like a corporate raid planned by someone with inside access." My voice remained even, professional. "Wright Construction is not for sale, not for dismantling, and not interested in the type of collaboration you and my brother discussed." Harrington's demeanor shifted, the affable facade giving way to calculation. "You're new to the CEO position, Alexandra. Construction is a challenging industry, especially for companies in transition." Marcus understood the realities of the market, the need for consolidation in the face of economic headwinds. What Marcus understood was how to betray his fiduciary duty for personal gain, I corrected. "What I understand is that Wright Construction has 35 years of excellence, a dedicated team, and a portfolio of projects that will continue to thrive under leadership committed to its founding principles." Harrington leaned forward, dropping all pretense of friendliness. "Let me be direct. You're facing an uphill battle. Marcus has already shared confidential information about your bidding strategies, client relationships, and financial constraints. Several of your key employees have been approached with very attractive offers. Fighting this will be expensive, disruptive, and ultimately futile." So it was to be threats rather than persuasion. I had anticipated this possibility. "Let me be equally direct, Mr. Harrington. Using confidential information obtained through Marcus's breach of duty constitutes tortious interference and potentially corporate espionage. Any attempts to poach our employees based on such information would expose Harrington Construction to significant legal liability." I slid a second document across the table, this one prepared by our legal team earlier that morning. "This is a cease and desist letter regarding any use of Wright Construction's proprietary information. Our attorneys have already filed for emergency injunctive relief protecting our business interests while the full extent of Marcus's actions is investigated." Harrington scanned the document, his expression hardening. "You're making a mistake. Marcus was right about you. Too idealistic, too attached to your father's outdated way of doing business." "My father built this company on integrity and excellence," I replied, rising to signal the meeting's conclusion. "Those principles aren't outdated, they're timeless, and they're non-negotiable at Right Construction. Security will escort you out, Mr. Harrington. After his departure, I immediately convened a meeting with our department heads to address the threat directly. Transparency was essential. Harrington's attempted intimidation suggested that more aggressive moves might follow. We have reason to believe that Harrington Construction may attempt to disrupt our operations by approaching our employees, subcontractors, and possibly even clients, I explained. I want to be clear. Right Construction is stable, our project pipeline is secure, and our commitment to our team is unwavering. I outlined concrete actions we were taking: legal protections, retention agreements for key personnel, accelerated profit-sharing implementation, and open-door communication channels for anyone approached by competitors. The next few weeks may be challenging, I acknowledged. But we will navigate this together with the same determination and integrity that built this company. Questions, concerns, rumors, bring them directly to me or your department head. No issue is too small to address. As the meeting concluded, Pat Jenkins, our veteran safety coordinator, spoke up. For what it's worth, we've all seen the difference in just one day under your leadership. Your brother talked about team, but he never listened to a word we said. You came in here and immediately addressed our actual concerns, treated us like we matter. That means something. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. These weren't empty platitudes. They were experienced construction professionals expressing authentic sentiment. In that moment, I recognized that while Marcus and Harrington might have strategies and schemes, I had something potentially more powerful. A team that chose to follow rather than being coerced or manipulated. The day ended with a series of strategic decisions designed to solidify our position. I authorized modest but meaningful retention bonuses for key personnel, expedited stalled safety improvements that Marcus had deemed unnecessary expenses, and reinstated the Employee Education Assistance Program that had been cut in one of his cost-saving measures. As I finally prepared to leave the office around 9 p.m., Edward appeared at my door with updated financial analyses. We've identified most of the questionable transactions, he reported. The damage is significant but manageable, especially if we can recover the equipment values through legal action against Summit. And our cash position for current projects? Tight. But sufficient. We'll need to manage carefully for the next 60 days, but there's a path forward. He hesitated. There is one other matter. Marcus attempted to access the company's main accounts this afternoon. The bank blocked it based on our earlier notification, but it suggests he's growing desperate. I nodded, processing this troubling development. Increase security protocols on all financial systems. And Edward, thank you for your loyalty, your expertise, everything. He smiled slightly. Your father once told me that the true measure of a company isn't found in its balance sheet, but in how it responds when that balance sheet is threatened. I think he'd be proud of today's response. As I drove home, exhausted but clear-headed, I reflected on the contrast between yesterday and today. Yesterday had been about confrontation, about removing the immediate threat Marcus posed. Today had been about beginning to rebuild, not just undoing his damage, but establishing a foundation for a stronger Right Construction moving forward. The road ahead remained challenging. Marcus and Harrington would not surrender easily. Their plans had been too far advanced, their expectations of success too certain. But with each hour, our position strengthened as their opportunities diminished. More importantly, the company culture was already showing signs of renewal. Without Marcus's caustic leadership, collaboration was replacing competition, transparency was eroding suspicion, and our collective focus was returning to what had always made Right Construction exceptional, doing quality work with integrity. The following weeks unfolded in a carefully orchestrated balance of defense and rebuilding. Each morning began with a security briefing. Marcus and Harrington had grown increasingly aggressive in their tactics, attempting to contact our subcontractors, with misleading information about right construction stability, approaching our clients with artificially lowered bids, and continuing to recruit our key personnel with extravagant offers. I countered each move methodically. When they spread rumors about our financial instability, I invited our largest clients to review our books directly with Edward, establishing unprecedented transparency that ultimately strengthened their trust. When they targeted our subcontractors, with promises of more lucrative arrangements, I personally visited job sites to reinforce our long-standing relationships and accelerated payment schedules to demonstrate our reliability. When they attempted to poach our employees, I implemented the profit-sharing plan my father had designed, but Marcus had shelved, giving our team tangible evidence of their valued place in Wright Construction's future. The Davis Hospital project became a symbolic battleground. After Marcus's interference and Hammond's incompetence had jeopardized our standing, I made it my personal mission to exceed the client's expectations. I relocated my office to the construction trailer 3 days a week, working alongside the project team to solve problems in real time and ensure every specification was met with precision. When an unexpected issue arose with the medical gas system's installation, I stayed on site for 36 hours straight, coordinating with specialists and engineers until the solution was implemented perfectly. Diane Winters, the hospital board member who had initially expressed concerns, made a point of visiting during this critical phase. "I've been involved in 6 major construction projects in my career," she told me as we toured the partially completed surgical wing. "I've never seen this level of executive commitment or technical competence." Her words validated not just my approach to the project, but the fundamental philosophy I was working to restore throughout Wright Construction. Excellence wasn't an abstraction or a marketing slogan. It was the tangible result of daily choices, attention to detail, and personal accountability, principles my father had instilled in me from my first day with the company. The legal front remained challenging. Marcus had hired an aggressive attorney specializing in shareholder disputes, filing motions challenging the validity of the ownership documents and alleging that our father had been unduly influenced in his decision to grant me majority ownership. Each filing required careful response, consuming valuable time and resources. James Patterson, our attorney, remained confident. "These are delay tactics, not substantive challenges," he assured me after a particularly contentious hearing. "The documentation is immaculate, properly executed and witnessed. Your father was meticulous about ensuring the restructuring would withstand exactly this type of challenge." The legal wrangling took an unexpected turn when Marcus's attorney attempted to depose several longtime employees, seeking testimonies that might suggest our father had been in mental decline when making the ownership changes. The strategy backfired spectacularly. One after another, veteran team members described William Wright's sharp intellect and sound judgment, often contrasting it directly with Marcus's impulsive decision-making. Pat Jenkins, who had known my father for over 25 years, delivered particularly damaging testimony. "William Wright was the most clear-thinking man I've ever met, right up until his final days," he stated firmly. "He knew exactly what he was doing with his company and who would best carry forward his values." I maintained a careful professional distance from these proceedings, focusing instead on stabilizing operations and reassuring clients. The company couldn't afford for me to be distracted by Marcus's legal maneuvers, no matter how personally painful they might be. Around the 6-week mark after taking control, I received an unexpected call from Robert, the attorney who had initially sided with Marcus during the boardroom confrontation. He requested a private meeting away from the office, selecting a small coffee shop in a neighboring town. "I've resigned from representing your brother," he explained, looking distinctly uncomfortable as we sat in a quiet corner. "I can't discuss the specific reasons due to attorney-client privilege, but I wanted you to know that I've also declined to participate in the continuing litigation against Wright Construction." I studied him carefully, noting the signs of stress in his posture and expression. I appreciate you telling me this, Robert, but I'm curious why you felt it necessary to meet in person. He hesitated, choosing his words with obvious care. While I cannot and will not breach confidentiality, I can say that I believe professionals have ethical obligations beyond zealous representation. When those obligations are compromised, he trailed off, then continued with greater resolve. I wouldn't want my departure to be interpreted as supporting certain strategies that may be under consideration. The veiled warning was clear enough. Marcus and his remaining advisors were contemplating actions that crossed ethical lines, perhaps even legal ones. I thanked Robert for his integrity, making a mental note to increase vigilance around our most sensitive operations. His instincts proved correct. The very next day, our IT department detected a sophisticated attempt to breach our project management systems, an attack that would have given the perpetrators access to proprietary bidding information, client communications, and strategic planning documents. The digital forensics pointed to a third-party security firm known to work with Harrington Construction. Rather than simply strengthening our defenses, I decided to address the escalation directly. I contacted the district attorney's office, providing evidence of what appeared to be corporate espionage attempts. While careful not to make direct accusations we couldn't yet prove, I established a documented pattern of concerning activities that would support more formal action if necessary. Simultaneously, I reached out to the 3 other major construction companies in our region, discovering that Harrington had approached all of them with proposals similar to what he had offered. Marcus, predatory arrangements disguised as strategic partnerships. This common experience created unexpected allies, construction leaders who had competed with Wright for decades, but shared our interest in maintaining ethical industry standards. Harrington's been trying to roll up half the market through these backroom deals, the CEO of Mendez Construction told me during a surprisingly candid lunch meeting. Your brother wasn't the first executive he's approached, just the first who was willing to sacrifice his own company from the inside. This broader perspective helped me understand that what we were facing wasn't just a family dispute or a corporate power struggle. It was an attempt to fundamentally change the construction landscape in our region, replacing established quality-focused firms with a consolidated entity, prioritizing profit extraction over craftsmanship and community relationships. Shatters realization solidified my resolve. Wright Construction's fight for survival represented something larger than our company alone. It was about preserving a business model built on expertise, quality, and long-term relationships against short-term profit-maximizing strategies that ultimately diminished the industry. I began implementing longer-term structural changes to strengthen Wright Construction against both immediate threats and future challenges. We formalized mentorship programs to accelerate knowledge transfer from our most experienced team members to promising newer employees. We expanded our community college partnerships to develop pipelines for skilled trades increasingly in short supply. We invested in technology that enhanced our project management capabilities while maintaining the human expertise that differentiated our work. Each initiative reflected both practical business sense and deeper values. The understanding that construction was fundamentally about people, both those who did the building and those who would ultimately occupy the spaces we created. As these changes took root, an unexpected opportunity emerged. Summit Development, the company Marcus had sold our equipment to at below-market rates, was experiencing financial difficulties, likely due to the legal challenges we had mounted regarding the fraudulent transfers. Through careful negotiation, we arranged to repurchase our equipment at a significant discount, simultaneously withdrawing certain legal claims in a structured settlement that benefited both parties. The recovery of our specialized equipment immediately improved our operational capabilities and financial position, allowing us to accelerate several projects that had been proceeding on adjusted timelines due to resource constraints. The visible return of Wright-branded machinery to various job sites also sent a powerful message to the industry about our resurgence. 10 weeks after the boardroom confrontation, I called a company-wide meeting, not to address another crisis, but to mark our emergence from the most acute phase of the struggle. Standing before the assembled team in our largest warehouse, with the afternoon sun streaming through industrial windows that illuminated decades of construction photographs lining the walls, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and cautious optimism. 3 months ago, Wright Construction stood at a crossroads, I began, my voice carrying across the unusually quiet space. The foundation my father built over 35 years was being systematically undermined from within. Our values, our relationships, our very identity as a company were at risk. I paused, looking out at the faces of people who had weathered this storm alongside me, some who had been with the company since its earliest days, others who had joined more recently, but embraced its core principles with equal commitment. Today, I can tell you with confidence that we have turned the corner. Our financial position is secure. Our project pipeline is robust. Our client relationships are stronger than ever. And most importantly, the culture of excellence and integrity that defines Wright Construction has not just survived. It has been reinforced through this challenge. The specific metrics supported this assessment. Project timelines back on. Track, safety incidents reduced to pre-crisis levels, employee retention stabilized, new contracts secured including a major university research facility that had selected us over Harrington despite their significantly lower bid. This outcome wasn't inevitable, I acknowledged. It happened because each of you chose to believe in what Wright Construction stands for. You chose quality over cutting corners. You chose collaboration over division. You chose the harder right over the easier wrong. As I concluded my remarks and opened the floor for questions and comments, I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a palpable transition from survival mode to renewed purpose. The questions reflected this change, focusing less on immediate threats and more on future opportunities, expansion possibilities, and innovative approaches to long-standing industry challenges. The legal battles with Marcus would continue for months, perhaps years. Harrington remained a determined competitor who would seek other ways to gain advantage. But in this moment, surrounded by the team that had demonstrated extraordinary resilience and commitment, I knew with certainty that Wright Construction would not merely survive. It would thrive, carrying forward the legacy my father had entrusted to me while evolving to meet the challenges of a changing industry. 6 months after taking control of Wright Construction, I sat in the completed atrium of the Davis Memorial Hospital expansion, watching morning light stream through the precisely engineered skylights. The space exemplified everything Wright Construction stood for: thoughtful design executed with meticulous craftsmanship, creating an environment that would comfort patients and families during difficult times. Every detail, from the sustainably sourced wood accents to the specialized acoustic treatments, reflected our commitment to exceeding client expectations while honoring the human purpose of the structure. Diane Winters joined me on the bench, gazing up at the architectural features we had fought so hard to preserve when Marcus and Hammond had proposed value engineering them out of existence. "The board couldn't be more pleased," she said, her voice carrying slightly in the carefully designed acoustics. "When all the upheaval happened with your company's leadership, we were genuinely concerned this project would be compromised. Now it's being featured in Healthcare Design magazine as a model for patient-centered environments." "That's gratifying to hear," I replied. "This project means a great deal to us." "Your father would have been proud," she added, knowing exactly the impact those words would have. "Not just of the building, but of how you've handled everything." The comment touched me deeply. Throughout the months of struggle, rebuilding, and transformation, I had often found myself wondering what Dad would think of my decisions, whether I was truly honoring his legacy while simultaneously moving the company forward in necessary ways. The Davis Hospital project had become emblematic of our company's evolution. We had preserved the core values and quality standards that had always defined right construction, while implementing new technologies and approaches that positioned us for the future. The specialized air handling systems, evidence-based design features, and integrated technology infrastructure represented a level of healthcare construction expertise that set us apart in the regional market. As Diane departed for a board meeting, I remained in the atrium, reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The most acute crisis had passed, but its aftermath continued to shape both the company and my own leadership approach in profound ways. Marcus's legal challenges had largely collapsed under their own weight, after 3 separate judges rejected his claims of improper influence in our father's succession planning. His attorney had approached us with settlement discussions. The final agreement included Marcus relinquishing all claims to company ownership, in exchange for a financial settlement substantially smaller than his original demands. He had departed the region entirely, relocating to Florida where, according to industry contacts, he was attempting to establish a real estate development firm with limited success. Harrington Construction remained a determined competitor, but their aggressive tactics had diminished after the district attorney opened a formal investigation into the attempted data breach of our systems. While no charges had been filed, the scrutiny had apparently encouraged Harrington to pursue growth through more legitimate channels. We still competed fiercely for contracts, but the existential threat to our company had receded. The more enduring challenges had been internal, rebuilding trust, restoring our organizational culture, and establishing my own leadership identity, distinct from both my father's and the shadow of Marcus's brief but damaging tenure. This required a delicate balance between honoring established traditions and implementing necessary changes. I had maintained many of my father's core practices: his open-door policy with employees, his insistence on visiting job sites regularly, his tradition of personally reviewing every client satisfaction survey. These approaches reflected timeless principles of engaged leadership and quality focus that remained as relevant today as when he had established them decades earlier. However, I had also introduced significant innovations, modernizing our project management systems, expanding our sustainability expertise, establishing a formal leadership development program to ensure continuity of our company culture and technical knowledge. These changes weren't rejections of my father's approach, but extensions of his fundamental philosophy: always evolve, always improve, always look beyond the immediate horizon. Perhaps the most significant change had been in our ownership structure. After extensive consultation with the board and our financial advisors, I had implemented an employee ownership component, allocating 20% of the company to a carefully structured ESOP, employee stock ownership plan. While maintaining my majority control, this step created a direct alignment between company success and employee prosperity, reinforcing our cultural emphasis on collective achievement and shared purpose. The announcement of the ESOP had been met with surprise initially, then enthusiastic support as the team recognized its implications. "Your father considered something similar in his later years," Edward had told me afterward. "He would have approved of your implementation." My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder for the appointment that had prompted my visit to the hospital today. A meeting with Vanessa, whose unexpected alliance during the crisis had evolved into a genuine if somewhat cautious friendship. Found her waiting in the hospital cafe, looking markedly different from the carefully polished corporate wife I had known during her marriage to Marcus. Her hair was shorter, her clothing more casual, and most notably, her expression more relaxed and authentic. "Alexandra," she greeted me warmly. "The atrium is extraordinary. I spent some time there before you arrived." "Thank you. It's one of our finest projects." I settled into the chair across from her. "How is the program going?" Vanessa had enrolled in a landscape architecture program at the local university, pursuing the environmental design interest she had abandoned when marrying Marcus. "Challenging but invigorating," she replied. "I've just been assigned my first major project, redesigning the entrance gardens for a community health center. That's wonderful. Do you have preliminary concepts yet? As she described her ideas, with genuine enthusiasm, I noted how completely she had reinvented herself after extracting from Marcus's orbit. Her divorce had been finalized months earlier, and while the process had been predictably contentious, she had emerged with both financial security and, more importantly, renewed self-determination. I actually have a professional reason for wanting to meet, she said after updating me on her studies. The health center project includes a small building component, a meditation pavilion, and education space. The director mentioned they're struggling with budget constraints but want something distinctive. I immediately thought of Wright Construction. We'd be interested, certainly. It's a small project by your standards, she cautioned. Probably not particularly profitable. Not every project needs to maximize profit, I replied. We've always balanced commercial work with community engagement. What's the timeline? We discussed preliminary details before the conversation shifted to more personal matters. Have you heard from Marcus recently? I asked, carefully respecting boundaries while acknowledging our shared connection. Vanessa shook her head. Not directly. Through attorneys, yes, as he continues trying to contest aspects of the divorce settlement. But nothing meaningful. She hesitated, then added, I did hear through mutual acquaintances that his Florida venture isn't going well. Apparently, he's discovering that business relationships built entirely on charm without substance don't sustain over time. I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Despite everything, Marcus remained my brother. His self-inflicted professional difficulties brought me no satisfaction, only a sense of wasted potential and unnecessary division. Your father once told me something interesting about Marcus, Vanessa continued, seeming to read my thoughts. He said Marcus had genuine gifts, creativity, vision, the ability to inspire, but that he lacked the foundation to use them properly. He compared him to a talented architect who never learned the fundamentals of structural engineering. The observation resonated with my own understanding of my brother. Marcus could envision impressive possibilities and articulate them convincingly, but he lacked the patience for execution, the attention to detail, and most critically, the ethical grounding to bring those visions to reality with integrity. Dad tried for years to provide that foundation, I acknowledged. Marcus just wasn't interested in building from the ground up. He always wanted to start with the penthouse. After parting from Vanessa with promises to connect her with our community projects team, I made my way to the hospital's East Wing where our crews were completing the final phase of construction. The project manager, Michael Torres, was reviewing installation details with the specialized flooring contractors when I arrived. Alexandra, he greeted me, his professional formality, in front of the subcontractors shifting to more casual respect once we stepped aside. Perfect timing. We're ahead of schedule on the therapy suites. If inspections go as planned, we can turn them over to the hospital next Tuesday instead of Friday. That's excellent news. Any concerns I should be aware of? Nothing significant. We had a minor issue with the therapy pool temperature controls, but the mechanical engineer found a more elegant solution than what was specified. Actually improves the energy efficiency while giving the therapists more precise control. This type of refinement, finding ways to exceed specifications rather than merely meeting them, epitomized what distinguished Wright Construction in the marketplace. Under Marcus's brief leadership, such improvements would have been discouraged as unnecessary expenses. Now they were once again recognized as investments in our reputation and client relationships. As I toured the therapy wing, observing the careful attention to details that would impact patient recovery experiences, I felt a moment of profound gratitude. Despite Marcus's systematic attempt to dismantle everything our father had built, the company had not only survived, but emerged stronger, more purposeful, and better positioned for the future. The crisis had forced necessary evolution, modernizing systems that had become outdated, formalizing knowledge that had previously existed primarily in institutional memory, creating structural protections against potential future challenges. What Marcus had intended as destruction had ultimately catalyzed transformation. That evening I returned to my father's house, still my residence, though I had gradually made subtle changes to make it my own while preserving its essential character. In his study, I opened the safe where I had discovered the envelope that changed everything months earlier. Among the documents and family mementos lay a small leather box I hadn't examined during that first urgent search. Inside was my father's watch, not an expensive luxury timepiece, but the rugged construction watch he had worn daily for decades, its face slightly scratched from job sites, its band weathered from years of use. Beneath it lay a handwritten note in his distinctive architectural lettering. Alexandra. This kept me punctual through 35 years of meeting deadlines, showing up when promised, and valuing other people's time as much as my own. Reliability isn't flashy, but nothing of lasting value is built without it. The company's future is in the right hands. Wear this in good health when the time comes. Love, Dad. I slipped the watch onto my wrist, adjusting the band to fit. It felt like a tangible connection to him, a physical embodiment of the legacy he had entrusted to me, not just the company itself, but the principles and values that gave it meaning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The construction industry was evolving rapidly, with technological advances, sustainability imperatives, and workforce demographics creating both opportunities and obstacles. Right construction would need to continue adapting while maintaining the core identity that differentiated us in the marketplace. But tonight, feeling the reassuring weight of my father's watch on my wrist, I was confident in our foundation. Marcus had been wrong in his fundamental assessment. Our father's approach wasn't outdated, it was timeless. Integrity, quality, relationships built on trust and mutual respect. These weren't liabilities in a competitive market, but our greatest strategic advantages. The company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The previous quarter's financial results had exceeded projections. Our project pipeline was robust, and employee retention had returned to its historically high levels. More importantly, the culture had been renewed and reinforced, with team members at all levels demonstrating passionate commitment to our standards and principles. Looking out from my father's study toward the city skyline, punctuated by numerous buildings right construction had helped create over the decades, I felt a deep sense of purpose and continuity. My father had built something that transcended physical structures, a legacy of excellence and integrity that would continue shaping our community long after any individual building reached the end of its useful life. Marcus had never understood that right construction's true value lay not in its assets or even its contracts, but in its people and principles. In his rush to extract immediate profit, he had been willing to discard the very elements that made the company successful in the first place. My path forward was clear. Honor the foundation my father had established while building upon it, in ways that addressed contemporary challenges and opportunities. Not preservation for its own sake, but thoughtful evolution guided by enduring values. The watch ticked steadily on my wrist, a reminder of both time's passage and the durable power of consistent principles applied over decades. Just as each building began with a carefully prepared foundation, our company's future would continue to rise from the solid base my father had established, strengthened now by weathering a storm that had revealed both our vulnerabilities and our essential resilience. 5 years after the boardroom confrontation that transformed right construction, I stood at the podium in the convention center ballroom, surveying the gathered crowd of employees, clients, partners, and community leaders. The company's 40th anniversary celebration represented more than just a milestone. It marked the complete emergence from crisis into a new era of growth and innovation. When my father established right construction with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox, I began, he couldn't have envisioned the company we've become today. But he understood something fundamental that has guided us through 4 decades of change. that buildings aren't just structures of steel and concrete, but vessels for human aspiration, connection, and potential. The room was filled with people who had contributed to our journey in countless ways. Edward Chen, still serving as our CFO, though now with a carefully trained deputy preparing for his eventual retirement. Pat Jenkins, whose safety leadership had revolutionized industry standards. Maria Rodriguez, now our controller overseeing a financial operation that had become a model of transparency and integrity. Vanessa, who had completed her landscape architecture degree and collaborated with us on several integrated projects, her designs complementing our structures with environmental sensitivity. The past 5 years have been transformative for Wright Construction, I continued. We've doubled our project capacity while maintaining our quality standards. We've expanded into sustainable building techniques that once seemed experimental, but now define our industry's future. Most importantly, we've deepened our commitment to the founding principle that construction is fundamentally about people, both those who create and those who inhabit what we build. The statistics supported this narrative of renewal and growth. Under my leadership, Wright Construction had increased annual revenue by 78%, while improving our safety metrics and client satisfaction scores. Our employee ownership program had expanded to 25%, creating financial stability for our workforce while strengthening their connection to company outcomes. We had established a training academy that addressed critical skilled labor shortages by developing talent locally, particularly focusing on communities traditionally underrepresented in the construction industry. As I acknowledged key contributors and highlighted significant projects, I felt a momentary pause when mentioning the Davis Hospital expansion, now regarded as a landmark achievement in healthcare architecture, and the project that had crystallized our company's resurgence. Diane Winters, seated at a front table, nodded in acknowledgement. Our shared history of navigating that pivotal project understood without words. Success in construction isn't measured just in completed buildings, profitable quarters, or industry awards, I observed, approaching the conclusion of my remarks. It's measured in relationships sustained over decades, in structures that continue serving their purpose long after ribbon cuttings are forgotten, in the invisible quality that exists behind every wall and beneath every floor. The celebration continued with a video presentation showcasing our company's evolution from modest residential builder to industry leader in complex commercial, healthcare, and educational construction. The timeline included the crisis period, acknowledged frankly, but placed in context as a challenging chapter that had ultimately strengthened our organization through the crucible of adversity. As dinner concluded and the formal program transitioned to more casual conversation, I circulated among the tables, connecting briefly with employees, clients, and partners who had supported our journey. Near the bar, I encountered James Harrington, now significantly older and somewhat diminished from the aggressive competitor who had once attempted to capitalize on Marcus's betrayal. Alexandra, he acknowledged with a nod that carried a complex mixture of respect and lingering wariness. Impressive milestone. Your father would be proud. Thank you, James, I replied, maintaining professional courtesy. I understand Harrington Construction recently completed the riverfront development successfully. We did, he confirmed, with considerably more attention to flood mitigation than the original plans called for. Perhaps we learned something from your approach after all. The tacit acknowledgement of how our companies had evolved in relation to each other spoke volumes. After the district attorney's investigation and the subsequent industry scrutiny, Harrington had been forced to reevaluate his predatory business strategies. While still a fierce competitor, his company now operated within more conventional ethical boundaries, occasionally even partnering with Wright on projects requiring specialized capacities from both organizations. Competition makes us all better, I offered, when it's focused on excellence rather than elimination. He nodded thoughtfully. Your brother hasn't fared well in Florida. Too much sunshine, perhaps. Not enough substance. The mention of Marcus still triggered a complex emotional response, regret for what might have been, sadness for the fractured family bonds, but also acceptance that some ruptures cannot be repaired, only acknowledged and incorporated into the larger narrative of one's life. We had not spoken directly in nearly 4 years, though I received occasional updates through distant family connections and industry contacts. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said simply, meaning it despite everything. As Harrington moved on, I found myself at the periphery of the room, momentarily alone with my thoughts despite the celebration continuing around me. The journey from that crisis moment to this milestone had been neither direct nor easy. The legal battles with Marcus had continued for nearly 2 years before final resolution. Rebuilding client trust had required extraordinary effort and persistence. Establishing my own leadership identity, distinct from both my father's and the shadow of what Marcus had attempted, had demanded continuous self-examination and growth. The most significant challenge had been balancing preservation and innovation. Wright Construction's strength had always derived from the principles my father established, but its future depended on evolution. Finding the proper equilibrium, maintaining our core values while adapting to changing market conditions, technological advances and environmental imperatives remained an ongoing navigation. The employee ownership component had proven transformative in this regard. By creating direct alignment between individual prosperity and company success, the ESOP structure reinforced commitment to our foundational principles while encouraging innovation that served long-term objectives rather than quarterly metrics. The most impactful initiatives of recent years had emerged from this intersection of experienced wisdom and fresh perspective. My reflections were interrupted by Michael Torres, now our Vice President of Operations, approaching with an unmistakable look of contained excitement. "The University Research Center bid," he said quietly. "We got it." The project represented a significant opportunity, not just for its substantial contract value, but for its architectural ambition and technical complexity. The research facility would incorporate cutting-edge sustainability features, specialized laboratory environments, and collaborative spaces designed to foster innovation across scientific disciplines. The university had emphasized quality and expertise over cost, selecting Wright Construction despite our proposal being slightly higher than competitors. "That's excellent news," I replied. "What made the difference?" The selection committee specifically cited our healthcare experience, particularly the specialized air handling systems we developed for the Davis Hospital surgical suites. They said our technical approach demonstrated deeper understanding of their research environment requirements than any other proposal. The connection wasn't coincidental. Our work on the Davis Hospital project, the very initiative Marcus and Hammond had nearly compromised through incompetence and cost-cutting, had established expertise that continued generating opportunities years later. Excellence compounded over time, creating a virtuous cycle of reputation, opportunity, and further achievement. As the evening progressed, I made my way to a quiet corner where a display of historical photographs chronicled our company's evolution. Among them was an image of my father at the groundbreaking for our first major commercial project. Younger than I was now, standing confidently beside architectural plans with his characteristic expression of focused determination. Beside it, a more recent photograph showed me in nearly the identical pose at the Davis Hospital groundbreaking. The generational continuity unmistakable despite the decades between. Edward Chen joined me, observing the display with the thoughtful perspective of someone who had witnessed most of this history firsthand. "Your father told me something interesting just weeks before he passed," Edward remarked. "He said he wasn't leaving you the company as a gift. He was entrusting it to you as a responsibility, because you understood what it truly represented, Ed." "He elaborate on what he meant?" I asked, curious about this previously unshared conversation. Edward nodded. He said most people see a construction company as buildings, contracts, equipment, and balance sheets. But he had built something more fundamental, a community of skilled people united by shared commitment to excellence, a repository of knowledge, accumulated through decades of solving problems. a culture that valued craftsmanship and integrity equally. The assessment perfectly captured what I had come to understand through the crucible of leadership. The company's true value wasn't measured by conventional metrics, but by its impact on employees, clients, and the broader community. The invisible, but essential ways our work shaped lives and sustained connections across generations. Your brother never grasped that, Edward continued. He saw the company as an asset to leverage for personal gain. You recognized it as a living entity, with purpose beyond profit. As the celebration began winding down, I found myself inexplicably drawn back to where everything had begun, our company headquarters, specifically the boardroom where the confrontation with Marcus had unfolded 5 years earlier. The building was quiet at this late hour, security systems recognizing my credentials as I made my way through darkened corridors to the William Wright boardroom. The space had been renovated since then, modernized while preserving its essential character. My father's portrait now hung beside updated images of significant company projects completed under my leadership. Visual representations of continuity and evolution existing in balance. 5 years ago, I had stood in this room feeling a mixture of determination and uncertainty, armed with documents that changed everything but unsure of what would follow. Today, I stood in the same space with the clarity that comes from challenges met and overcome, from principles tested and validated through adversity. Marcus had been wrong in his fundamental assessment. Our father's approach wasn't outdated. It was timeless. Integrity, quality, relationships built on trust. These weren't liabilities in a competitive market, but our strongest assets. By remaining faithful to these principles while embracing necessary change, Wright Construction had not just survived, but thrived in ways that would have made my father profoundly proud. The journey wasn't completed, of course. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, opportunities, and decisions requiring the same careful balance of preservation and innovation. But standing in the quiet boardroom with 5 years of successful leadership affirming the path chosen, I felt a deep certainty about both our foundation and our direction. The company would continue building, not just structures, but a legacy worthy of what my father had begun, and I had been entrusted to carry forward. A legacy built on the understanding that the most enduring form of strength comes not from dominance or manipulation, but from integrity maintained even when tested by fire. The watch my father had left me ticked steadily on my wrist, a tangible reminder of continuity amid change. Some might have seen it as merely a timepiece, just as some had seen Wright Construction as merely a business. But both represented something far more meaningful, the tangible embodiment of values and commitments that transcended their physical form, creating impact that would continue long after any individual building reached the end of its useful life. This was the true revelation of the past 5 years, that leadership wasn't about possession or control, but about stewardship. Marcus had failed to understand this fundamental truth. In his desperate grab for ownership, he had forfeited the opportunity for meaningful leadership. The title of CEO had never been the prize. The privilege of continuing what our father had begun was the real inheritance worth protecting. As I prepared to leave the boardroom, my phone rang. An unknown Florida number. Instinct told me who it might be before I even answered. Alexandra. Marcus's voice, older and somehow smaller. I saw the anniversary coverage online. For a moment, I said nothing, absorbing the reality of hearing my brother's voice after years of silence. Congratulations, he continued, filling the void. 40 years is significant. Thank you, I finally responded. How are you, Marcus? A heavy pause. Starting over. Again. Florida venture imploded. Turns out reputation matters more than I accounted. 4. The understated admission contained volumes of unspoken recognition. I leaned against the boardroom table, looking at our father's portrait. I've been thinking about Dad lately, Marcus said, his voice uncharacteristically reflective, about what he built. What I almost destroyed. Why are you calling now? I asked, neither hostile nor welcoming. I found his old journal. From when we were kids. His voice softened. Remember that playground he built for the children's hospital? How he let us help design the climbing structure. I did remember. One of the rare moments when Marcus and I had collaborated rather than competed. Our complementary strengths briefly aligned toward a common purpose. He wrote that it was the happiest he'd ever been on a project. Both his children, working together, creating something that would bring joy to others. The memory hung between us, a glimpse of what might have been if ambition and resentment hadn't poisoned everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a position or anything. Tangible, Marcus clarified. Just acknowledgement that I understand now what I couldn't see then. The company wasn't just an asset to control. It was his legacy to protect. Outside the windows, the city skyline glittered with buildings that bore our family's invisible signature. Structures, created with integrity that would stand for generations. Dad always said there's no expiration date on doing the right thing, I offered. Not quite forgiveness, but an opening. Even if it comes later than it should. As our conversation ended, I remained in the boardroom, contemplating how legacies evolve in unexpected ways. The company had survived Marcus's betrayal, emerging stronger through the challenge. Perhaps someday the Wright family might follow a similar path, not erasing the damage done, but building something new atop a foundation that had proven resilient, enough to withstand even the most determined assault. Some structures, after all, are built to last.